Free Japan channel number 75. Today, May 8th, Thursday. The time is 1 p.m. Daytime of Thursday. Good afternoon, everybody. Yokohama is today very clear. The sky is serene. White cloud is floating in the sky, here and there. The season is moving from spring to summer. Good season. The green of the forest is greener and greener. The air is so comfortable. Today's FGC topic is the crisis of French democracy. Have you ever heard of the news that Marine Le Pen was barred from presidential election in 2027? It was such a big news that the world shook by this information. The leaders of each country mentioned something about this news. Of course, here in Japan, Prime Minister Ishiba said nothing about it because Japan and France have not so much in common. In addition, Prime Minister Ishiba is not a talkative person. Therefore, he had nothing to say about this. However, except Asian leaders, American leader Trump and European leaders mentioned something about this shocking news. Marine Le Pen is now leading the party called National Assembly. This party has been often called extreme right by the media. The previous entity of this national rally was National Front, whose top was the father of Marine Le Pen. Therefore, Marine Le Pen inherited this party from her own father. At the time of her father, the name of the party was not National Rally, but National Front. And that at that time, the party was much more extreme than now. At the era of National Front, this party was regarded as something weird, something questionable, something obsolete. The father of Marine Le Pen was reiterating the words of anti-Semitism, and not only anti-Semitism, but also anti-foreigners. In one word, this father was xenophobia, a kind of xenophobia, who hates foreigners and who hates the different people. It was 1980s that the National Front, the previous entity, was established and began its action, political action. However, at the time, this party was disregarded as weird, as I said. However, Marine Le Pen inherited this party and she expelled her own father from the party and changed the name of the party from National Front to National Assembly. This change of the name of the party meant that her resolution was so solid that she would never return to her own father's policy. Marine Le Pen was making an effort to grow out of her own father's policy, literally extreme right. Therefore, she tried to make her own party more democratic, more acceptable in the French society. Thanks to this effort of Marine Le Pen, the daughter, this party began to attract French people little by little, and finally it gained 20%, or in the latest survey 30% of the popularity in France. Now, in France, if a party gained more than 30% support from the population, it can be the first party because there are so many parties, political parties there in France. So it doesn't have to get 50%, so absolute majority. Instead, 30% is sufficient for the party to gain the hegemony in French politics. Therefore, it was inevitable, or it was definite that National Rally would get this hegemony. Therefore, in 2027, in 2 years, Marine Le Pen would be clearly the president of France. And then the verdict of French courthouse popped up, and it said that Marine Le Pen embezzled 4 million euro from the assembly. It said that the secretary of Marine Le Pen didn't work at all. However, she said that this secretary worked and she got 4 million euro. The media are now reporting this was the embezzle of Marine Le Pen. Of course, Marine Le Pen repeated this verdict. However, the decision of French courthouse is so grave that she cannot so easily turn over this decision. Now, not only Marine Le Pen, but also other people, even in the left people of France, said that this is the crisis of French democracy. Marine Le Pen now repeats that this is not the judicial decision, but this is political decision, which means Macron administration decided that Marine Le Pen could not be the candidate of presidential election of 2027. First, this political decision, then verdict. This is the insistence of Marine Le Pen and National Assembly. The future of French politics is now very obscure because of this verdict. It would be possible that Marine Le Pen really cannot run for the election of president in France. Then, number 2 of National Rally now is Jordan Bardella, who is 30 years old, so young man. He is very eloquent in his speech, and he is so famous in the loyalty to Marine Le Pen that Marine Le Pen herself also trusts his political ability. And these two persons, Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella, is a very good political combination. However, he is too young, isn't it? He is too young to be a president. Now he is 30 years old. In 2 years, he is still 32. Then, can he be the president of France in 2 years? Perhaps no. Looking back, France is a country where the separation of administration, legislation, jurisdiction. Once again, legislation, administration, jurisdiction. The separation of these three powers is necessary for democracy. France is the first country where this assertion was proclaimed by Montesquieu. It was 17 centuries. It was 17 centuries. In the country, this crisis of democracy, it is very strange phenomenon from outsider, but it's reality. Now, the side of National Rally must be preparing for the counter attack to the establishment, to the Macron administration, and to jurisdiction. But how? We should pay attention to the news from France. Thank you.